Hello, everyone, and welcome to the August 7th edition of the Decaturish.com Twitch show. I'm your host, editor, and publisher, Dan Wisenhunt. We got a great show for you today. We have Decatur Mayor Patti Garrett. Mayor, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
And we have Decatur Mayor Pro Tem Tony Powers. Commissioner Powers, how are you?
Hey Dan, thanks. Thanks for having us on.
Well, thank you for joining us. Our new assistant editor, Alex Brown, is joining us. She's going to be covering the Decatur City Commission meetings from now on. Alex, how are you?
Hello, I'm well. How are you?
Great, thanks for joining us. And we are also joined by Decaturish contributor George Cheedy. George, how are you?
I'm great.
Awesome. And Decaturish contributor Hans Utz is with us as well. Hans, how are you?
I'm wonderful, Dan. Thank you for asking me.
Well, thank you for joining us. So the way this works is we're going to talk for a little bit about some city government news. At about 15 minutes into every show, I'm going to check the comments and see if readers have questions. If you want to ask a question while we're live, what you'll need to do is create a Twitch account and then give us a follow and join our chat. And once you do that and start asking some questions, we can ask questions of the mayor and the mayor pro tem. So, Mayor Garrett and Commissioner Powers, oddly enough, this is the first Decatur-specific show that we have done since we did the Twitch broadcast, and I think the primary reason for that is when we started doing this show, you were really busy. You're still really busy, but I think at that point you were probably zoomed out because Zoom meetings had started to sort of become the norm. So I really appreciate you taking time out, knowing how busy y'all are, to join us. And Mayor, you wanted to talk to people about the census, right? And Alex wrote in her story the other day that the reporting date on that has been moved up, so there's actually a pending deadline on that. What's going on with the census?
Well, of course, that was a decision by the Census Bureau to move that date up, and it's really concerning. I think I was doing some reading about some of the impacts of moving that date and changing the amount of time that there are people that go out to the hard to reach census folks. And in 2010, the response rate before contacting hard to reach people overall in the United States was 73% in 2010. It's now 64%, and they've shortened the time considerably. And I heard Stacey Abrams on an interview the other day that was, and she was talking about how significant that was in terms of getting an accurate count and the consequences of that for all of us over the next 10 years. And she explained the process of how if you don't think there's an accurate count, then there's a way to sort of you compare the current that census tract with neighboring census tracts and sort of estimate what they think the makeup would be in terms of socioeconomics and racial makeup, and in many cases that is not accurate information, and that can lead to significant problems with redistricting. And I got something from it was called the Center for American Progress that actually talks about what the impact of the census and that data is specifically on the state of Georgia and its funding. And it says that based on the census, that the state of Georgia receives like $1.3 billion for highway planning and construction. And Dan, I can send you this
Yes,
data. 2.7 for the supplemental nutrition assistance program, 342 million in special education, 530 million for school lunch, 54 million for low-income home energy assistance, 57 million in grants to prevent and treat substance abuse. And another important census-based formula is the medical assistance percentage that allocates money for Medicaid, the federal foster care program, and a number of child care and development funds. And so if Georgia is under undercounted, those funds are going to be significantly impacted. And so we're all hearing about how important it is to vote this year. And we really, really need to make that a twofold effort and say we need to not only vote, but we need to make sure we are counted in the census. And I pull some, you may know that I'm sure you know, Dan, I hope some of the other folks listening and watching know that we're having this kind of fun contest between the commissioners. And right now, Mayor Pro Tem Powers and Commissioner Dusenberry, the guys are tied for the lead. So we are, the three female members are really pushing hard to try to up our numbers. But I had a comparison for my census tract in Winona Park in 2010 at the same time frame. In terms of numbers of weeks, we were at 66.5%, and now we're at 63.2%. So our numbers indicator are also not as strong as they were in 2010, and we're trying to figure out where those gaps are and how to narrow those gaps. But I think anybody who is watching and anything that we can do, because we know that time frame of getting the data actually collected and the numbers of people participating is going to be shortened significantly and will have long-term impacts. So I encourage people, if you have sort of forgotten about it or don't know exactly how to do it, there's a lot of information online. There are phone numbers, but it is really, really important. I have to give a shout out to my friend in George in Pine Lake. They had very dismal numbers, I have to say. And I think the mayor shamed Pine Lake a bit, and those numbers have come up. But DeKalb County is also undercounted, and we desperately need to make sure that everyone is counted. And so, again, some of the if I remember correctly, some of the numbers that Stacey Abrams indicated were, it was about 4% of white population at the time is thought to be undercounted. I think it was about 14% African American, and higher than that for Hispanics and Native Americans. So we really need to push it out there that every person counts. And I think there's been confusion about whether you should be counted if you are not a citizen, but it is my understanding that the census is the number of people living in the United States in the various census tracts. And so there's not a citizenship question, and everyone who was residing wherever you were residing, I believe on April the 1st, you need to be counted in the census. So that's my push for this evening. So,
I try to imagine, what would lead to the low response rate, and my only theory, and it's just a gut sense of it, is that maybe people have some uncertainty about where they're going to be living within the next 2 to 3 months. I was in that boat as well, frankly, when all this first started, and I was like, all right, well, what are we doing? But at the same time, people are home, and they have time to do it. It was easy for me. I got on my computer and did it, and it took 5 minutes. Vesmuth asks a census question. What are the reasons folks who would stand to be negatively impacted by failing to respond most often give for not responding to the survey? Is that something that we know? Why people aren't responding?
In some cases, it may be lack of trust in government. There is a lot of mistrust in maybe how that information might be used. Historically, the Census Bureau has been very nonpartisan and has used that data is used by not only by states and local jurisdictions, but by a number of different agencies for funding as well as survey data. And so I think that might be a part of it. It may be that this was, the first year that it went, the easiest way to do it was online, and there may be some confusion about, if I can't do it online, how am I supposed to do it? So, and then I think maybe the pandemic and has just people, it maybe hasn't been a priority. And I haven't, these are just, this is kind of conjecture on my part. It's not anything that I have specifically read. I have heard, that some folks, and the fact that initially there was a citizenship question that was being proposed to include, and there may be some families or communities that may think that still there's going to be some way to link back to that. So, but in some of our other folks that are out here that are on the panel with me may have some additional kinds of input. I know in my census tract, it includes the Columbia Theological, and there are folks that live on campus there. And I've reached out to the president to say, can you make sure, that people who are living on campus, they may not feel like, they may be there. You're supposed to be wherever you are residing on April 1st, or we're residing on April 1st. So to make sure that they realize that they need to be counted as part of this census tract. So I don't have other ideas, but that's a great question.
My understanding is it's in part a smaller budget for this year, right?
Yes,
Of the
absolutely.
census, right?
Yeah.
And the manifestation of that, first of all, it's the first time that we're really pushing the digital portion of the census as opposed to the mail portion of the census. If you remember the 2010 census, if you didn't fill that form out, it showed up in your mailbox
Right.
every day for like a month
Right.
before, right? And some of that persistence is necessary, and it's not. I got 2 mailings this year, and so when you combine the fact that we aren't in people's faces, there's a smaller budget for doing it, we're cutting it short. It's problematic. I would ask, Mayor, if how does Georgia compare, and the metro area, frankly, compare to other MSAs and the state to other states? So, like, are we 60 oddish percent? Sounds like we're pretty far behind where other folks are as well.
According to this article, the overall response rate in the United States was at 62.9%, and the response rate in Georgia is at 58.8%. So, and 63%, not great, right? And but we aren't even up to 60%. And so even with, I think they're called enumerators, people that estimate what the census numbers should be, even with that data, the state of Georgia and DeKalb County stand to lose millions of dollars in federal funding, and our highway funds, and as well as a number of the funding that is available for assistance in a lot of different, as I mentioned, Medicaid and other programs. So I think, it is and the whole, consideration of redistricting that lasts for 10 years, and what that might look like if we don't have accurate census counts and information about. The only thing now I think that you can't do with redistricting is discriminate in terms of the minority population. And if we don't have good information about that, then that's going to affect how voting districts are drawn.
So the name of that tune, everybody, is please do your census.
please.
Come on, it's easy. It takes 5 minutes. Just get it done, please. There's a lot of money on the line. Before we get to my next question, we did have a reader who asked me to put in this plug for something that they're doing related to alleviating hunger from COVID-19. Lauren writes, local residents are participating in an international scavenger hunt for charity called GISH, that's GISH, to feed children impacted by COVID-19. Team names are hard, wants to remind you that during these times, frequent snack attacks are normal, so do not panic if you find yourself in front of your pantry or refrigerator at odd hours. I never panic about that. I'm always kind of relieved. If you would like to get involved, please go to randomacts.org. Donate or volunteer to support a variety of causes for folks in need, including feeding children that may go hungry while school is online. So there you go. We have some Oakhurst people tuning in, so I wanted to, before we let the other panelists get to their questions, can you tell us quickly what is the situation with the Boys and Girls Club? I know if there's a property transaction going on that you're somewhat limited in what you can say, but I mean, is a purchase something the city is actively considering right now for that? And the Boys and Girls Club is, just so people who don't know are familiar. That's been in operation there for about 50 years. Like a lot of institutions, they've been negatively affected by COVID-19. They can't run camps. They can't do a lot of the things that produce revenue for them. And the city has a contractual relationship with the Boys and Girls Club, and they lease an indoor pool over there, which is very popular with the residents. And as part of that lease, the city has a right of first refusal if that property ever goes on the market, which means they have a right to say, hey, we want to buy that before anybody else does. So that opened up, when they said we're closing down, that of course will present the city with an opportunity to buy the property, but I just want to know, is that even happening? Is that something the city is talking about?
I think I can disclose that the city is interested and is in conversation with the Boys and Girls Club, but I can't really say any more than that. So
they haven't quoted a price or anything, or that's not something you can talk about.
It's not something we can talk about.
Okay. Go ahead.
Would that purchase be? And again, please don't answer this if you can't. Is that like a DDA purchase, or is that a development authority type purchase, or is that something directly the city directly itself? Like increased parkland or recreation space. Like how is that being thought about?
Yeah, I can't answer that. So
fair enough.
Understood.
Well,
I will ask that question eventually.
So
you can't answer that.
So a little bit of news just for our people who are tuning in. There are some discussions going on right now about the city potentially buying the Boys and Girls Club property there in Oakhurst. So there you go. Don't say we never did anything for you. Alex, what questions do you have for our public servants with the city of Decatur?
I mean, this isn't necessarily like a super wonky journalist question. It's really more of a resident question, but I was just kind of wondering what the city is doing to help our unhoused population during the pandemic, because I've just noticed a lot of people really struggling right now. And with like George, sorry, with what we're doing with like all the anti-racist training and the Black Lives Matter mural and everything, like what are we actually doing to help the community of like unhoused people of color that are in downtown Decatur or in Decatur?
You're talking about the homeless population.
Homeless population.
He's trying so hard not to use the word.
I appreciate.
It's just a different term. It's just a different term.
I'm sorry. Is that word? People gotta update me on this. Is homeless? Is that? Can we not say that?
No, it's
okay.
Okay. It's
transient.
interchangeable.
Okay. Yeah.
It's interchangeable.
Yeah. So
I'm just being a Gen Z.
Gotcha. All right. So what is going on there? And homelessness has been something that's been talked about even before the pandemic. Obviously, that's exacerbated a lot of the problems. But what is the city doing on that front, Mayor or Tony?
So a couple of things that, and I've experienced this in a couple of different worlds, a couple of things that you have to consider. There are those that are homeless by choice versus those that are homeless by circumstance. And those folks that have chosen that path because they want to be, you know, it's very difficult to get them the resources that they need because they choose to live that lifestyle. You know, we had a program in place that would go out and help these folks reconnect with family or loved ones to try to get them placed into a great situation. And some people opted in and some people decided that they didn't want to. You know, clearly we have a relationship with the faith-based community here, and there were, you know, feeding and doing things that were very compassionate, things that we do here in Decatur. So, you know, I think it exacerbated the situation. And then when COVID-19 hit, it took it to a completely different level. You know, clearly it's not something that, you know, we have to take all sides. You know, it can be considered a stain on the downtown when you have folks that are very aggressive and leaving trash and leaving litter and, you know, being, you know, extremely aggressive towards folks going downtown. So we have to think about that aspect. And then there are others that are completely harmless that are just looking to, you know, to get by, and they kind of live in the shadows. So, you know, we've had some conversations with our faith community, with the business leaders, trying to address, you know, those concerns, because the last thing you want is to be seen as uncompassionate towards, you know, those folks, but also be uncaring towards the businesses downtown.
So I'm glad we brought this up because one thing I wanted to talk about was a while back the DDA proposed. I think they called it an ambassador type program where there would really be not a police interaction. So whenever there was a call related to a homeless person in the square, it would be a civilian, somebody not in uniform, that would go and talk to them. And the police department basically said, "Hold up, you really shouldn't do it this way if you're not trained." But it's interesting that that happened now before we started having this discussion about whether we should have social workers responding to these complaints as opposed to uniformed police officers. Has the city given any thought to redirecting any resources that way, to where when somebody calls and says, "Hey, somebody's being really aggressive and panhandling," where the city would send a social worker or somebody along those lines to talk to them as opposed to a uniformed police officer?
I think at this point,
Patti?
the concern is that we do have some folks that are homeless that have some significant mental health issues, and there is concern about you know, if they are panhandling in an aggressive manner, then that we don't want to put people at risk that are not fully trained to deal with situations that might escalate. And so I think our police are working really hard. They know a lot of the folks that are downtown, and we have had a number of our businesses concerned during the pandemic, particularly as the businesses began to open back up, with public health concerns, with the aggressive panhandling. And so, you know, people can, you know, sit on benches, but I think the police are kind of going through the square and saying, we need you to pick up your trash. We need you to sit and not sleep in the public areas. And that there's some issues with human waste that we really have to address. And we do have we have portalets and a hand sanitizing station that was put out during the pandemic. It's still there, and but I think we are trying to and we are working with some with Mercy Housing and with some other groups to see if there are some nonprofits that can assist with providing some alternatives. And interestingly, DeKalb County, with what, 750,000 people, I'm not sure exactly of the population.
Say it. I know what you're going to say.
Okay.
Say it. I want to hear it. Say
There's
it.
not
Say it
a
out loud.
single homeless shelter or facility in all of DeKalb County, and
That's
so
what I wanted you to say.
yeah, there that presents a significant challenge. DeKalb County has been assisting us and did help us with providing some housing at the beginning of the pandemic to allow folks a place to shelter in place when that order was in place. But once it expired, many of the folks don't have an alternative, and some are kind of daily visitors that come and are there, but others there is not a facility. There are some nonprofits that we're working with, but it is there is not a place in DeKalb County, and we really need to have a place that will offer some alternatives and wraparound services. I think that's
George is our resident policy expert regarding homelessness. George, do you have any thoughts to add here?
A few. I'll be brief. Let me start with this. It's not all on Decatur, but I actually think that there's a broad conversation that really does need to happen between the DeKalb Municipal Association and the county about who should be responsible for what right now, and whose basket of money needs to be tapped. DeKalb needs a shelter. It's ridiculous that a county with 750,000 people in it does not have emergency shelter. The strategy right now is to send somebody to Decatur Cooperative Ministry, and then somebody there will cut a voucher check for one of a dozen fly-by-night motels around the county, which are increasingly becoming nodes for social disorder that create as much, they create as many problems as they're solving, to be perfectly frank. The communities around those hotels are looking for those hotels to be shut down because they're not being well run. And because all sorts of other social disorders are emerging around them. And I think a lot of this is because our social services delivery system is fragmented and it's garbage. And we're not ready to spend the money we need to. I know the homeless people in Decatur who you were talking about. There's the big guy, I'm not using names, but there's the big guy who sits regularly out on the bench in the square. There's the older woman who argues with herself loudly in front of the church across the street from the square. There's the informal mayor of Decatur Square. You know exactly who I am talking about, who likes to get into fights, occasionally with cops. But there's a sort of detente right now with him because you're right. Everybody knows exactly who I'm talking about. And the kind of outreach that's necessary in order to address this, folks who have a serious and persistent mental illness and are chronically homeless, it's months of outreach before those folks will trust anyone enough to take the housing that's in somebody's pocket. Never mind the housing shortage. They have to take it, but to take it, somebody needs to work with them for 3 and 4 and 6 months. And nobody's quite figured out who should pay for that yet. And that's why it hasn't happened.
To be transparently clear, we're paying for it. We're just not paying for it through the correct mechanism to actually solve the problem, right? And that's, I think, what the community needs to understand. that we chronically underfund. We don't have a shelter in DeKalb, and the Health and Human Services group in DeKalb is so dramatically underfunded on this point anyway. You look at model programs in places like, I referenced this in the article that I just sent you, Dan, Eugene, Oregon, where the Cahoots program, you have police there for safety purposes, but the individuals engaging with the mentally ill individuals are fully trained in all the psychology and the social services that are necessary to engage in those conversations in a productive way, build the relationships over months, like George is describing, in order to actually fix the problem. There is no scenario by which you send a beat cop on a mentally ill homeless call and get a resolution. It doesn't fix it. It delays, moves it a block down, frustrates everyone. The police are not the solution to homelessness. It's not possible.
I will say this, you're not getting nearly enough credit, Decatur, for this inclusionary zoning stuff that you just put through. You want the long-term solution to it, you hit the big problem is the shortage of housing. And the idea that you've got this thing that's going to make some housing that other people don't, people they should be in the New York Times. I'm dying that people aren't giving it the attention that it deserves. And I'm going to write about it at some point.
Well, George,
right now it's an intention.
You know how people just love to sensationalize zoning headlines, George?
Exactly.
It's always leading the front page. So we're gonna close that particular discussion. I appreciate Alex bringing it up, and it's been good. So if you're just joining us, this is the Decaturish.com Twitch show. I'm your host, Decaturish editor and publisher Dan Wisenhunt. Our guests today are Mayor Patti Garrett, Mayor Pro Tem Tony Powers of the city of Decatur. Our panelists are Decaturish assistant editor Alex Brown and Decaturish contributors George Cheedy and Hans Utz. If you want to ask a question, you're going to have to create a Twitch account and give us a follow, and we will be glad to put your questions to our officials. One of our questions comes from somebody whose username is Dearborn Park, and Dearborn Park says, ask Tony Powers why the impervious path in Dearborn Park was paved with asphalt without public input. We were given soil erosion as the reasoning, which is erroneous because the path was eroding because it was engineered during the drought 10 years ago. But now we have normal rainfall, that's why we have erosion. In addition, asphalt was left on the side of the path and drainage ditches were covered up by asphalt. Tony, do you want to take a swing at this?
Sure, yeah. The fact that, there is, so one of my other gigs, I sit on the board of the Southport Conservancy. So I'm no stranger to paved path versus natural path and all the things that are associated with natural resources. This was one of those things that was done, that was a decision that was made by Public Works and our Public Works department to stabilize a deteriorating environment. There was no malice, no misintent, no intent to mislead anyone in the neighborhood. This was that with the current paving contract that we have to stabilize a pretty bad situation over there. Typically when you have something like this, especially now that we're in this pandemic, there's not this long runway of getting a bunch of public engagement. It was something that was done with the intention of, quickly stabilizing something that was deteriorating. The fact that it wasn't published, we probably could do a better job and say, hey, this is coming, but there was no misintent led to lead the community to think that something else was going on.
Well, Dearborn
now,
Park.
If there are parts that need to be attended to, if things got paved over, listen, we've all had home improvements done. I've had outlets drived over with sheetrock mud 100 times. We've all had that. Contractors, when they're in their mode, they don't pay attention, and this is what they do. So we need to get those things corrected. If there are issues, please direct that to our Public Works department, and we will happily make sure that no storm drains are paved over.
I do.
Dearborn Park, I don't know if that answered your question, but if you have any follow-ups, please feel free. I'm sorry, Mayor, were you wanting to weigh
I
in?
was just going to say that I walked that path recently, and it is a portion of the path that did have that repair. It is certainly not the entire length of that pathway, and it was a portion that I think, due to rain, was almost impassable in terms of being able to enjoy the path because of the mud and erosion that was happening. I just, from the question, I just wanted to make sure people understood that entire path had not been paved over. It was a section of it that was basically sort of repair work to enable it to be used, I think, by more people.
Cool. Thank you for your answer. Everybody, we've got about 11 people watching us right now. If you like what you're seeing, give us a signal boost. Get online and share our Twitch stream with people. We need more people to find out about this. This is a good way to interact and get answers from your public officials. Dearborn Park did have a follow-up. Dearborn Park said, we asked 2 weeks ago for the asphalt to be removed or addressed, so this isn't new. Why haven't they addressed it yet? Mayor or Commissioner Powers, either you want to address it?
So, I think I have not seen a request. I have an official city email. That is where I do all my city business. That is the place where that information lands and where it needs to go. I didn't see
You breaking up on us, Commissioner.
that are, I'm not, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm on a hotspot. So that's no Wi-Fi. You hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yes, sir.
Okay. If they make sure that they send that to tony.powers@decaturga.com, I will make sure that goes to the appropriate place. That's the only place I do official City of Decatur business.
Dearborn Park, I appreciate your passion about this issue, but we are going to have to move on. So, panel, do you have any other questions? Hans, George, Alex, let it go.
I did want to say, so George, you saw an outline of a column coming up on policing and some recommendations. Dan, I just you as well. In it, I make a series of policy recommendations for addressing a lot of what's talked about when people talk about police brutality. And, it's another one of those monumental Hansot's 5,000 word columns that Dan loves me for. But what I do want to say is, of the list of the 10 recommendations, I take it pretty far, about as far as I think. Well, I mean, it's certainly a lot farther than almost any major municipality that I know of would be comfortable with making changes. It's intended to provoke, and it almost certainly is going to receive pushback from large departments. Completely unrelated, I got a really kind of an informative one-pager, a couple pages from Decatur Police Department, Chief Booker, that more or less outlines everything City of Decatur police are doing to address police brutality and address some of the issues that we're seeing community-wide. And it's almost a verbatim, step-by-step, adoption of everything that I put forward as a recommendation. And so I really want to just congratulate Chief Booker and thank, Decatur PD for the kind of work that they're doing. I don't want this to get completely hagiographic, because it's not like we can't do better, but it was pretty impressive to have read what the department is doing and what they have been doing, and really specifically, because I think this is the core problem with many major municipal departments around recruiting and training, to ensure that you have individuals of the right temperament to carry a weapon and to be authorized to use force, that it isn't their desire to use force, which is the kind of the core problem we have in a lot of departments. So that was just
Did you have a
wanted to
question you wanted to ask on that, or were you just making his
No,
point?
I just wanted to thank and congratulate and say well done, and see if you guys had any comments on y'all's perspective on where they are.
I really appreciate that. I think Chief Booker has been a proponent for community policing. He's one of the chiefs that is participating in the community trust initiative that was started out of LaGrange and looking at their building trust in community and you working with different groups. And because if you don't have that trust before you need it, then you're going to be in trouble. And I appreciate that you said that. And I do think that one of the caveats that anyone who wants to be a police officer in Decatur, Chief Booker has said, we can teach someone how to be an officer. They have to have that mindset of being a community involved person first, and then they can go to training and learn the other pieces of being a police officer. And I think one of the best examples of that is Officer Robinson, who was a youth pastor who decided he wanted to become a police officer. So it was not somebody who went into the academy because they wanted to use a gun, right? So I think that's the point that you're making, is that the screening of the people that come to work in the police department is done on the front end, and then the training and there's constant training about how to de-escalate. And I think I really appreciate you pointing that out. And I think Tony would agree with me that Chief Booker is the first one to say, we can always get better. We can always get better. Nobody's arrived yet. So
I mean, the oath is serve and protect. If you forget that first word,
right,
you're in the wrong business.
And the other thing, one of the things that our police department took upon themselves to do and look internally with their strategic plan of how could they be better. So they're not just walking the walk; they're also talking the talk. So they're looking from within, trying to figure out how they can make themselves better. So I think they finished a first strategic plan and possibly getting ready to start working on a second. Is that right, Mayor Garrett?
That is correct. Right. So,
well, any other questions from the panel before we get back to some reader questions? George, you have any?
Just one. Like I've got the evictions thing bouncing around in the back of my head right now. Like I don't know. Actually, what I really want to know is what kind of phone calls and emails you guys are fielding right now through all of this, like at the city level, like the pandemic, the layoffs, all of it. Like
that's a good question.
I get like state reps and state senators and whatnot pinging me in my ear going, I am like, people are calling them because everything seems broken. I don't know what you're hearing.
Yeah, that's a great question. Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, what kind of emails and phone calls are you getting these days? What are people asking you about?
I'll let the mayor go first. Well, what? I'll take it first.
okay.
They can range from, in the early days of COVID, when we opted to not pick up yard clippings, they've ranged. It's yard clippings, it's speed humps, it's sidewalks, it's public safety, it's mask or no mask, it's close the restaurants down, it's open them back up. I mean, this is a time like no other. I'm not old enough to remember the Vietnam War, even though my father fought in it. But I can't imagine a time that was a peacetime where we were in a state of this much change almost daily. So, the questions vary from day to day, from hour to hour, from minute to minute. So it's a wide range. And, I think we're all trying to figure this out. And the thing that I think the phrase that has stuck with me, the best is you can't solve a pandemic from the bottom up. And I will just leave it at that, because there's a whole lot of interpretation that can be taken from there.
there was an interesting one in there, like the mask thing. I kept waiting for like Brookhaven to get sued along with the city of Atlanta, but apparently, like the governor wasn't about that. But you have a mask ordinance. You have a mask mandate, or did. Did you get email and phone calls? Like, did people start saying, "Hey, don't do this," or "Hey, I'm glad you did this"? Like, what was your feedback?
Single email that said, "Don't do this." We got many emails saying, "Please pass a mask ordinance." So I think the community was very much behind the passing a mask ordinance. So I think I don't recall getting a single email saying,
Freedom.
yeah, freedom, right?
I mean, let's
be
real. I mean, Decatur's a different.
Yeah.
Decatur ain't typical, okay? Like Decatur's a very liberal, well-educated city. So I mean, I'm sure you've got in the city, you've got close to 80 to 90% of the people who are. George, you're doing a little. What's that?
This tiny little number of people who have lost their minds, but they're everywhere. Yeah. That's kind of why I'm wondering.
So what's interesting to me, and one of the things I found out, and I'm trying to find this image, because Decatur, way back in, I forget the year, 2008 or 2009, passed a pandemic response plan. Like, you can go and find it online. And what's really interesting about it is if you go down, it's like there may be civil unrest due to economic stress. And you read it and you're like, damn, this thing got it pretty right all the way down. I think the one thing it didn't maybe hit is absenteeism. I don't think absenteeism has been terrible. I don't think you've had 50, 60% of your workforce out due to the COVID. But have you...
Well, that was pre-Zoom, right?
Right.
So it didn't anticipate this.
Have you looked at that plan recently? And if so, what are your thoughts about how prescient that was? That document was from 2008, 2009. I wish I could find it. It's kind of amusing.
Yeah, it is. And I looked at it when we first had the pandemic. I mean, when it first started, and had conversations with Andrea, and I remember Brian Downs stating at some point, he was part of that training, and they went to Emory to, figure out how to plan for a pandemic, and it's sort of like emergency management training. You have all these plans and hope you don't ever have to use them, but that certainly formed the basis for, I would say there were not a lot of cities out there that could say, oh, let's go back and look at our pandemic plan, and so I think and it's my understanding that Chief Washington, who is our head of our emergency response team for the pandemic, is we will have an update of that once we get past COVID. So looking at the parts of that are working really well, but how do we update it in the day of Zoom and other things that we couldn't that part we couldn't predict at that point.
The complete abdication of all national leadership, you mean?
Yeah.
I also
Alex, you want to weigh in?
I also read that document because sort of just like how I deal with things is trying to compare it to like previous planning or like things that happened in the past or whatever. And one thing I did notice about it is it estimates that a pandemic would last 8 months. So I hope that stays on track, but I don't feel super confident about it.
Yeah, I've actually pulled it up. Let me read the assumptions from this document, because I find this fascinating. The assumptions are as many as 30 to 50% of the government employees could become ill at the pandemic's peak. Another 5% may refuse to report to work, either because they fear becoming ill or because they are caring for afflicted family members. Another assumption is the government will not be able to perform all functions or provide all services at full capacity throughout the pandemic. Any government office may be closed because of staffing shortage or because of a limited community quarantine. An indeterminate number of people in the community will be unable to reach government offices to conduct normal business activities. Confusion within the community and demand for information could overwhelm our existing communication systems. Now, of course, a lot has changed on that point since 2008 and 2009. Some vendors will be unable to provide services or deliver supplies. Travel will be restricted for some periods of time. This one really got me. Pandemic-related financial stress, possibly civil unrest, and enhanced opportunities will increase the risk of security threats, and the pandemic will cause a serious economic downturn, the scope and duration of which are impossible to predict. So I was wanting to read that. I don't know if anybody wants to offer a comment on that, but
I actually have a couple questions.
Okay.
Right. So I know that Hugh Saxon, deputy city manager, was involved in helping put together some relief for some of the small businesses in the downtown corridor. And so I wanted to ask, in no particular order, how much did that cost? How effective was it, from however you guys define efficacy? And are there thoughts or plans on re-upping or doing more, since this is, now we're entering into a second spike and we obviously aren't kind of coming out of it this summer? It's going to be something that lingers through the fall. What are y'all's thoughts?
Well, first, let me say that we are working very hard to get some CARES funding from DeKalb County. And we are trying to work out an agreement because the governor has released funds from the state for the amount. It's like $174.99 per capita in all of the cities in Georgia, except for cities that are a part of a county that received CARES funding. And so if we get CARES funding, then we would have additional resources to put towards helping small businesses because we had over $800,000 of ask, and we had $560,000 worth of money to give in a lottery system. So we know that we couldn't fund all the ask that we had, and we know some businesses did not apply because they felt like even with 0% interest and 48 months to pay it back, that might not be. And if we get CARES funding, we can turn those into grants, not loans, and then have additional money. So I am hoping that we have an agreement with the CEO. It has been to the DeKalb County Commission. They're working on an intergovernmental agreement with the city attorneys and the county attorney. And I think the cities want money. First of all, our population counted toward the CARES funding. And secondly, we feel like we are nimble enough to get that money out in a faster manner. We can cover some of our COVID related expenses that we have spent on personal protective equipment, and can go back and get those funds covered. If so, that's my hope, to provide additional help. And I know I'll let Tony talk a little bit about, I'm sure you know about the Legacy Match program, but we answer specific programs about the small business program that we currently have, and whether or not we're going to be able to do more.
So one of the things, folks, that we did was we raised $60,000 through basically small donations in the community to help. And so what the $400,000 that the city put in with the $100,000 that the DDA put in, we were able to reach about 27 businesses and average about 20,000 to each of those businesses. And it was a great, sort of grassroots. Let's figure out a way, because we didn't want our downtown and our business district to look totally decimated at the end of this. Again, I think, Hans, you said it earlier, we are now experiencing a second wave. Technically, we're still in the first wave, but who knows what this is going to look like. And what we were trying to do is help those folks, stabilize and get through until they can get reopened. As the mayor said, we are looking for this CARES funding to help us with, another round. And it may not be out of the question where the legacy project comes back with another campaign. So, we really value our businesses, not just downtown, but throughout all of, Decatur, and hope that we can do something to help, keep these guys going and folks going until, we get to whatever normal is again.
So I want to point out that we are 3 minutes from 7 o'clock. I do want to respect Mayor Garrett's and Mayor Pro Tem Powers' time. We do have some other questions. Do y'all mind staying for 30 more minutes and talking, or do you have to go?
We'll see how my internet holds up.
All right. If you're willing to stay, I am. But I want to be respectful of your time.
I can't promise 30 more minutes, but I can promise, a little bit more time.
All right. Well, thank you. And just wanted to point out that I actually did apply for one of those loans, but because of the lottery process, I wasn't in that round of funding. But I will say the reason I applied for it was because the repayment date is tied to the end of the emergency order, and that keeps getting extended. So it says literally 12 months after the emergency order. So, I mean, who knows how long that's going to. So I was like, hell yeah, I'll sign up for that. Why not? It's like I'm so in debt to Uncle Sam right now. It's not even funny. But anywho, so we had some questions on the Homestead Tax Exemption. The city doesn't really handle that part of it. That's a school board question. But we did do a story about the Homestead Tax Exemption. It's on Decaturish.com. I think it's under trending. Hans is on that committee. Hans, can you tell us real quick what's going on with that?
Was there a question?
They just wanted a general update about They wanted a general update about the Homestead Tax Exemption, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that.
Yeah, got it. So we are very quick background. We're charged with trying to figure out the initial homestead exemption was miscalculated. I'm not going to pull punches on that. This is an error that the schools did. And it ended up costing about $2 million more per year than anticipated. So we've been charged with how to equitably pull that back. And the short answer is it's going to be $2 million less. We have to figure out how to do that in a way that protects the seniors that are most vulnerable and feels fair to the community. And so we have a couple of ideas that we're working on back and forth right now, where it's likely a combination of income and age, but more information should be coming forward. I think that the report is due early September, and we should have some solid answers with real analysis behind it at that point. These meetings, by the way, are all public, and so please do feel free to pop in and ask questions and listen as we're talking. We're all citizens of Decatur as well. We're not employees of the school system. And obviously we're very much interested in and influenced by what people that are passionate about this topic have to say about it.
Great. So we have a question from Liddy. And Liddy says, I was wondering if you all have discussed Agnes Scott going remote as well as other colleges in the area and how that will impact Decatur. And I think that's a great question because so much of disposable income, well, two things. Students have some level of disposable income that supports the economy, but they also are part of the local workforce. A lot of these students that are, waiters and have these other side jobs. So it is going to be a big deal. Now, I know Emory will have some, not a lot, but they will have some students on campus. There are some special circumstances, but Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any idea of what the effects of Agnes Scott being and Emory being remote will be on the city?
I mean, I don't have any specific data in terms of what the economic impact will be. Certainly, we those students participate in internships. The students participate in the Arts Alliance a lot of times has an intern from Agnes Scott, and they visit our coffee shops and walk downtown, and their parents come to visit. And so we know that we will miss that presence. And I don't know how to really quantify it in terms of economic impact, but I think also just the kind of the social impact that having a group of students as a part of our community, we will definitely miss them, miss the, walking through a college campus right now. I mean, we miss it walking through like our elementary schools and around there, but when you walk through Agnes Scott or Columbia Theological and you don't see a single soul, it feels eerie. And so we're all hopeful that schools can come back when, as you know, Agnes Scott had planned to come back, and we're working very hard to make it safe, and decided a week or so ago that just wasn't going to be the best decision. And President Zach has COVID and is recovering, but I feel like it's a loss in a lot of different ways, not just economically, but just the kind of interaction of those students and being a part of the fabric of Decatur. I have to say our schools, our colleges are great community partners, and so we will miss seeing those folks just interacting and being a part. And I know our businesses will miss them. There's a bookstore across the street, there's a bookstore down the street, there's a bookstore in downtown Decatur, and those students frequent those areas as well, and coffee shops. So it's
not bars at all, though.
Not bars.
There's no beer trunk on any of the establishments.
And maybe some of we remember, Hans, we don't have bars. We have food establishments that serve alcohol, and that soon we'll be able to deliver it, right? So
yeah, that good. So small thanks, I guess, to the governor for that.
Who would have thought the state of Georgia would pass the legislation to make that happen? So
yeah, well, I think he assumes we all need a drink at this point. Yeah, so I appreciate y'all. So let's talk about the planners for just a second. So my whole thing with the planners.
This was going to be Tony's.
Well, okay. So here's the thing about the planners. When they first, I get why they're there. To me, the planners are kind of like Murder Kroger in the sense that it's this thing that the community has sort of made fun of to the point that it's become indispensable in some way. Like, for years and years, people are like, that Kroger, it's a nuisance or whatever. But then they're turning, 20, 30 years later, they're going to tear it down. They're like, oh, you can't get rid of our Murder Kroger. We're going to miss it so much. And I feel like the planners have sort of become that. Like, it's something that, like, if it wasn't there, what would we laugh about, at this point? So are the planners going to stay? I mean, I feel like now they kind of have to. I mean,
the reason that they were there were to be temporary as we reevaluated that corridor with a new traffic plan. And, obviously COVID put a deep halt to a lot of that conversation. And, looking at them in your background, the thing about planners is we expect them to have plants in them. And without plants in them, they were just a bunch of empty boxes. And so, trust me, I've heard more than enough feedback on the planners with them not planted. So I'm thankful that there are things in them. And yes, you become a little nose blind to them. And trust me, I would rather that be the news every day.
Yeah.
For the next 6 months situation that we're in. So the planners are a pleasant relief, a pleasant smile of, let's not take ourselves too seriously because there are much bigger issues, but, it's doing its intended purpose right now.
Do you have a planner that is your favorite planner? The one that you personally have an affinity with?
One from the end.
Yeah. Like, did
I
you
love them all.
did
They're
you
all my children.
did you take it personally? Like when a car wrecked into one, like was that like a personal thing, or you know? I'm just kidding. I know.
You know, the funniest thing was the planner that was in the Madison Avenue Soapbox Derby. I mean, that was
Yes,
pretty creative. I
we
mean,
have
I extra points for that one.
we have a planner emote on our Twitch channel. So if you are a subscriber, if you pay like I don't know, it's like $1 a month or something, and you get a planner emote. So there you go. So and we also have an emote of Hans and George's head, which is also great.
You got approval for mine.
We
Great.
got we got approval for yours. Yeah, they had to scrutinize it extra closely. They're like this can't be. He can't be working for this organization. He looks too respectable. They had to go through it. So we talked about the planners. One thing I wanted to ask Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, and this is going to sound kind of silly, but people are really bummed out right now. This is a hard time for a lot of us. Our kids are going to be home. We're not going to be able to send them to school. Some of us are facing economic uncertainty. There's just a lot going on and not a lot of good stuff happening. Are either of you optimistic about what's going to happen to us in the next few months? And what would you say to people who are kind of struggling right now with everything that's going on? Because I think we kind of look to our leaders for that too. You know, we look to them for that reassurance when stuff gets real.
I do think, I certainly recognize the difficulty that people are having now. Some of it, as you mentioned, economic, that circumstances have changed. They may have lost a job or may have childcare issues that impact perhaps both parents were working at one time, and now that's just not possible. My son and daughter-in-law that live in Asheville, my daughter-in-law worked for a program that they contracted with the schools, and she traveled from school to school and was in the classroom. And even when they go back, they don't want somebody going to a different school every day. And so I think, she probably will not be employed, and she's doing all of the homeschooling. So, I recognize that and how difficult it is to homeschool your children when you thought it was going to be kind of short term. And I encourage people to reach out to friends, or if they need help, to not be afraid to call and find some help. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that, Dan. That's maybe something the city could do, is to put out a list of resources of who you could call, and what kinds of help might be available, and so that if people feel like they really need to talk to somebody and to let them, just be able to express that level of frustration or depression or whatever is bothering them, so that they can see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I happened to watch a Georgia Public Broadcasting equity and inclusion broadcast last night that was sponsored by the Georgia Municipal Association, and one of the mayors on that, it was a discussion with mayors from 4 different cities, and it was a moderated panel about how mayors how your city is handling the pandemic and some of the challenges. It was the mayor of Atlanta, the mayor of LaGrange, the mayor of Augusta, and the mayor of Macon, Bibb County. And he said, in particular, by nature, we have to be optimistic when we're leading a city, just so that we can at least say, this is a really, really tough time, but Decatur is resilient, and we pull together. We saw that in supporting our small businesses. We continue to see that, and that I loved one of the things that the mayor of Pine Lake said in a letter is that we don't have a vaccine yet. Our best vaccine is what we now do for ourselves to protect ourselves and other people. And I think to remember that we make choices, and that the more that we can do to protect public health, the shorter the time it's going to be before we get to the light at the end of the tunnel. And I know I'll let the Mayor Pro Tem make some comments, because I know he has people coming into his store, I'm sure, that express frustration and difficulty, and gratitude that they can socially distance and come at least do some therapeutic yard work or home decorating or home remodeling by visiting their local Ace Hardware. So, but I think that's a great question, and I will definitely follow up on that to see, can we provide some information about mental health services and who would be, I mean, normally, some of that would fall under, the county, but I think if we can provide a list, sort of like, here's who you call for your small business help, here's a list of references or folks to call if you feel like you have a mental health issue, or that you need to talk to somebody. So I don't know if the youth that thought that, or if it was a reader, but thank you for bringing it
I will
forward.
say, no, it just occurred to me because, I mean, we have nothing to fear, but fear itself speech ain't happening. That is, there ain't going to be anything at the national level where there's this communal effort to fight this thing. We've basically gotten the message that we're all on our own. Some states have taken it on as a state initiative. Unfortunately, Georgia has not. Georgia has, by and large, outsourced a lot of these decisions to cities, and then simultaneously told them that they don't have the power to address the things that the state isn't even addressing. So I think it becomes even more imperative that we hear this stuff from our local leaders, because they're the people that are closest to us. They're the people that we see and interact with every day. So unfortunately, this should be coming from the state and the federal level, but it falls on your shoulders. And I wanted to know if you or Commissioner Powers have anything to say to kind of help people who are struggling right now, who are going through a tough time, your constituents.
One thing that I will say, that the one thing that I've noticed just over the 4.5, 5 months that we've been in this, people have discovered hobbies and pastimes from long ago. People are gardening, people are walking, people are biking, people are spending time with their children outside. So the things that we got away from, prior to this pandemic, we've rediscovered. And so that brings me great joy and great optimism that this will be something that will continue forward. People have discovered the outside again. So anything outside, whether it's tubing or walking or hiking, go try to buy a bicycle. That is great. We're going to become a much healthier society, hopefully, when we get through this. So that brings me great optimism. One of the things I think that before all this, we were worried about our well-being because we didn't spend enough time outside. I think we took it for granted, and I don't think we'll ever take that for granted again. So I'm very optimistic that, those that are struggling, they're reaching out to friends, hopefully. They're reaching out to people that they haven't seen in a long time, finding old college roommates. It almost feels like the end of Scrooge when he says, if you're having a downtime, call an old roommate, call an old army buddy. I mean, that really is what it is, because we are naturally communal, and we demand and crave that interaction, and we haven't gotten it. So I think when this is all over, I mean, you're going to see sort of this grand, reckoning of feelings and emotions. I mean, lots of hugs, lots of high five, lots of kisses. And I think that's what people probably miss most. And, we're here to say, as your elected leaders, we'll try to do the best we can to help you get through what you need by providing, whether it's opening the tennis court, or opening the swimming pool we can, or keeping the dog parks open so that you can get out and see other people. I think that's the big thing, to be able to engage with other people.
Well, thank you for those thoughts, Commissioner. I really appreciate you sharing that with us, and you make a lot of great points. We are at 7:16, so we're going to wrap up, but I wanted to offer Mayor Garrett and Mayor Pro Tem an opportunity to leave us with any parting thoughts or anything they want to share that maybe we didn't get to before we let y'all go.
I did want to let folks know that there will be information.
Mayor, you want to go? I'll go first.
Oh, go ahead.
One thing I will say, a couple of things we've hit on today. Oh, yeah, I'll let you finish up.
No, go ahead. And then
please
Zoom.
Go out. If you have not done your census, it is city underrepresented. And we got a little personal pride in it, too, because we want Decatur to be really well counted. And like no other time, please, 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 please exercise your right to vote. That is probably paramount to anything else that we can ask you to do right now. It is super important. There's a runoff election on Tuesday, and then there's a pretty big election in November. Please, 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 we implore you, go out and vote. People died, so I have that right. You have that right. Go vote. Be safe, wear your mask, social distance. Let's get through this, because dang it, I want college football.
Amen. Mayor
That's
Garrett.
Right. So thank you. I think you'll hear that go out and vote and get counted for the census message again and again. So I appreciate you inviting us. This has been a lot of fun. It's nice to see some faces that I haven't seen in a while. Yours, Dan, and I saw Alex at, I think, the monument coming down, and I saw Hans there, and George may have been there, but I didn't see him. But I appreciate
George is everywhere.
George is everywhere. I can tell that, right? So, but I do. It makes me really appreciate the community that we're in, and the leadership, the other members of our city commission, our leadership that is at the staff level, and also the people that live in our community really being supportive of one another and being supportive of taking care of each other during the pandemic, as well as recognizing the anti-racism training that needs to happen, and the anti-racism Black Lives Matter movement, and how we move forward during this pandemic, and recognizing that as another thing that we absolutely have not paid enough attention to. And I am committed, the Mayor Pro Tem, the City Commission is committed to moving forward in that arena, as well as a part of our response and our real love for this community, and how do we make it a place that everyone feels that there is equity and inclusion. And just wanted to, we talked about voting, we talked about the census. We will be, before too long, restarting our strategic planning process, and it will be virtual, and there will be more information coming out about that. But that's another opportunity to help give input about what we want to see happening in the city over the next 10 years. And we put it on pause, but it is time for us to figure out how to pick that back up again. And there should be, I think we'll see some dates and information as to how that's going to start happening before too awfully long. So I'll encourage everyone. That's another great, as you mentioned at the very beginning, Dan, when we were talking, that people need to participate and have their voices heard, because we depend a lot on that input. So with that, I thank you all again and appreciate the opportunity to be on Twitch.
Well, we appreciate you, Mayor and Commissioner Powers, and we appreciate your public service, especially during a time where it's probably not a whole lot of fun to be a public servant. So we do appreciate you being there and being leaders in your community. And thank you for joining us. Thank you to the panel for joining us. The Decaturish Twitch show will return on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Don't know who the guests are going to be. We always figure it out by Wednesday, so we'll let you know as soon as we know. Everybody, please, to reiterate, take the census, go vote, wear a mask, stay healthy, stay safe, enjoy your weekend, and we will see you on Wednesday. Bye, everybody.